So what is happening, and if you're not paying attention, you might have missed this, and the best place to look is the #1 state in the United States, the largest state, California, laying off thousands and thousands of teachers, emptying prisons, low-security prisons, because they can't pay the cost, very expensive. We're a special nation. We have more people per capita in our jails as possible. Costs $30,000 to $40,000 per year to imprison these people, so it's very expensive, and therefore if you have a fiscal crisis, let them out. The logic is the same as having unemployed, homeless people sitting across the street watching the empty house until the city comes and tears it down. You know, who's in the asylum and who's observing? Oh, well. So the crisis in terms of the people on the ground, in terms of the jobs, in terms of the housing foreclosures, and in terms of city services and the crisis of cities and states, is just moving and developing. So you're getting what Mr. Edwards, remember him, the guy running for president way back when? He spoke of two Americas, but it was not anywhere near so clearly developed and defined then as it is now. You have a tiny group of enterprises at the top. They have gotten the lion's share of government help, and a footnote on that, because it could have been done a little bit better in the film. We do not have a private banking system anymore. It's very important that you all understand. All the major banks in the United States, the really big ones, Bank America, Citibank, and so on, those exist at the pleasure of the United States government. Their debts are guaranteed by the government. Their bad assets have been pledged for loans from the Federal Reserve. Their other bad assets have been purchased by the Treasury. That's what the TALF and the TALC and those other things you lead on. In the heyday of borrowing, one of the ways all these financial new gimmicks, and for those of you that pay attention, asset-backed securities, mortgage-backed securities, the way all those things were marketed all over the world, these new financial investments, the rest of the world aren't stupid. Americans aren't stupid either. In order for an investor to buy into these new gimmicks, they had to be convinced that they were reliable. There were two ways that that was done. And you see the way the American economy works if you understand this. How did the people who put together these new gimmicks, how did they sell them to the rest of the world? The first thing they did is they went to something, a very special kind of company called a rating agency. And they got the rating agency to say, this is a AAA security. AAA is the best you can get. There are many rating companies, but three of them completely dominate the economy. It's like most industries in America. Three big companies, they make all the decisions. Then there's a bunch of little ones, they don't count. The three, in case you're interested, one is called Moody's, one is called Standard & Poor, and the third one is called Fitch. Moody's shouldn't be called Moody's because Moody's is owned by somebody who has managed to create a reputation for himself as a wonderful man of the stock markets. His name is Warren Buffett. He owns Moody's. And what did Moody's and Standard & Poor and Fitch do? They gave AAA ratings so that investors around the world bought these securities, many of which were simply pieces of paper that entitled the person who bought them to get a piece of all the mortgage payments made per month by a whole group of people. That's called bundling mortgages into mortgage-backed securities. Right? So how did you get the Chinese government, one of the biggest buyers of these things, why were they willing to buy an asset based on the ability of folks in Kansas and Iowa to make their mortgage payments? They got a AAA rating. But the Chinese and other buyers were still skeptical. Give us more or we won't buy. We're not so sure about those ratings. By the way, the ratings are now openly admitted to have been completely phony. And there are lawsuits which will continue at least for the next 25 years in which everybody and their brother is suing them for having put a AAA on something that was triple Z. Okay? But this wasn't enough, so they came up with a second thing. They came up with an insurance policy. This is what they did. They stapled, literally, they stapled the insurance policy to the new security, saying, okay, buy this investment, it'll get you these monthly payments by all the mortgage payers that you're buying a piece of. It gets you a AAA rating. See, these companies have said it's very secure. These people will always pay their mortgage. They are law-abiding American citizens, and they would not let you down. Now, AAA. But now we're going to staple on top of that an insurance policy, which says if any of the people who are supposed to make a monthly mortgage payment that's gathered together and given to you as your share, if any of them ceases to do so for any reason, this company will make it good. It's an insurance policy, right? So they wrote, and that was stapled. So the investor had a good paying investment with a AAA rating guaranteed by an insurance company. And it couldn't be just any insurance company. It had to be a famous one. So the most popular place to go was something called the AIG Corporation. And for a dozen years, the AIG Corporation made wild amounts of money, charging premiums to all the issuers of these securities, so they could be stapled to the thing, and you could find some moron out there to actually buy them, which they did. And AIG wrote these things, and it wrote them believing, like Alan Greenspan, as was quoted, that this was free money. I mean, America is a rich country, a prosperous country, a successful country. It's private enterprise, and it's just wonderful. And what risk were you taking? I mean, it's better and better. So AIG wrote. So then people, surprise, surprise, starting in 2006, actually when it began, there began to be growing numbers of Americans who couldn't make the mortgage payments. They had borrowed when they shouldn't. They had borrowed without understanding what the mortgage, I presume you all know those stories, mortgages that were written in a careful way. So you had little payments in the first year, and then they got bigger later on. And so for the first year, you felt wonderful. This house was cheaper than your crummy apartment. But 2 years later, your crummy apartment turned out to be cheaper than this house, but you couldn't do it. So as that began to happen in the 2006, suddenly people who owned securities that were backed by mortgages where the mortgagee wasn't making the monthly payments, said, my investment is turning into doo-doo. And they went to the insurance company and they said, make good. And the insurance company said, I'm sorry, I don't have any money. That's what AIG did. When AIG said to the investment community, all over the world, you know those insurance, it's exactly as if your car insurance company, you called them up having had a fender bender, and you said, you know, my car is wrapped around a tree, please come and give me the money. And they giggled, told you they had no money, and wished you a happy day. You know? You wouldn't know, you'd hang up the phone, and then slowly the shock would overwhelm you. That's what happened. That's what happened in the investment community. And they turned to AIG. AIG told them, we wrote these policies, we've been making AIG is the biggest insurance company in the world. So they'd gotten real big and powerful off of this. They had no money, at which point the government, of course, had to step in. And not, as some of you, I think, and I urge you not to think like this, not because they're in bed with the leadership of AIG and they're all corrupt. I'm not saying they aren't corrupt, but that's not what's going on. They didn't step in out of an act of corruption. They stepped in for a really simple reason. All over the United States, pension funds of workers had bought these securities. For those of you that are a little bit older, either you are already a pensioner or you are looking at it, you've got to be real interested in this, because if those pension funds had discovered, in fact, that insurance policy was useless, that meant the investments they had made, on the basis of which they send you your retirement checks, aren't worth anything. Which means if something isn't done, you're going to get a letter any day now from the administrator of your pension fund saying, dear madam, we regret to inform you that the pension you've been receiving, $3,246 a month, will have to be reduced because of this situation, and you will now be getting $84 a month. Right? This is not possible.